don't know why I'm sniffing now. Hello, everyone. I'm just trying to catch my breath. I was running up the stairs, so I'm a bit out of breath. How are you guys doing? Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about preparing for our 2020 garden. I know for some of us, the growing season has begun already, and for some of us, we're just starting indoors or getting ready to start indoors. But when we look at last year growing season, right across the globe, based on what I've seen from various YouTube channels, we've had a lot of challenges, haven't we? So many things were happening in the garden last year. It seemed as if climatic condition was out of control. And in addition to that, pests seem to be out of control for last growing season. There was just one challenge after another, whether it is drought or flooding or it is some form of disaster. But last year was just, it was pretty awful for a lot of gardeners. Thankfully, though, we were able to have some fairly nice harvest. There were some whose garden was just badly damaged by the climatic conditions. So today we're going to be talking about, and this is audience participation, where we're going to be sharing what plans we have in place, if any, for this growing season and the challenges that we might face. Hi, Cece, how are you? And Han White. Yeah, so the plans that we have in place for this growing season, just in case things are out of control. Yes, I know last year we had in my region, pest was a big issue. I think that and drought was the two biggest challenges that I faced last year. Usually, when I have problems with pests, it's usually like just say one or two types of pest. Hi, Growing with Jay, how are you? Yeah, it's been a while, yes, but it's nice to have you join us. Yeah, so last year the two biggest issues that I faced was pests. And usually I'd have one or two different type of pests in a year. Last year I had quite a bit to deal with. And as usual, I try to prepare in advance for the pest that I was anticipating, because usually it is the same type of pest that would come back each year. But last year that wasn't the case. I had so many different pests that I've never seen before. I've heard of them, but I've never seen them, never had to deal with them before. So, and I know that a lot of them are triggered by the climatic condition as well. So I'm trying to see how this year I can prepare for them, or at least plan ahead, just in case. It doesn't mean that the same pests that I had last year are the same ones that I'm going to be having this year, but at least trying to prepare for whatever may come. Let's see. Anne says I started sowing my March seeds. Okay, nice. I haven't started yet, not for March. I did um my scallions and my onions, my sweet onions, and my echinacea for February. But as for anything else, I haven't started for March yet. I'm a bit behind with some, but I think I have like a week or two that I can actually play around with, because most of what I want to start in March, they recommend you start the first to the second week. So I guess I still have a little bit of time to play around. Yes, I was planning to get an early start because I would like to start. If they say start the second week in March, I like to start like the first week or the so in March, because then I get a little bit of headway, because you know how the climatic condition is. Sometimes it's you can actually plant outdoors earlier than they recommend, or you cannot plant at the time that they recommend. You have to wait until later. So I like to start planting a few weeks earlier than they recommend. But anyway, that's not the case this time around. I'll just have to take my time and do what I can. But definitely my peppers and my tomatoes, I have to get those out because those require a lot of growing time. Let's see. Anne says, I haven't done my scallions yet. I will after work tomorrow. Okay, nice. The good thing with scallion is that it is not like onions that are going to be producing bulbs for you to harvest. So because of that, even if you start it late, you still can have scallions to use. Onions, you can start late, but it depends on what you're starting with. So if you're starting with seeds, then you have to start really, really early, like 3 months earlier is what they recommend. And so if you're starting with bulbs, however, you can start when the growing season actually begins. So you're not really late where the scallion is concerned, because it's not as if it is going to be producing bulbs for you to harvest. It's just the foliage. Okay, yeah. So do you guys have any plans in place for what you will do in case things goes south in the growing season? So one of the things that I'm contemplating is, last year we had a serious drought, but then in the spring of last year, in the winter of last year, we didn't really have a lot of snow, apart from we had two big snowstorm, but outside of that we didn't have a lot of snow. So then we had drought throughout the growing season. So I figured if we didn't have a lot of snow, that is an indication that we might have drought. But this year we had a lot of snow. So maybe there's a possibility that the problem we're going to be dealing with this year is not a drought, but maybe too much rain. So putting plans in place, what do you do if you have too much rain, especially for plants that doesn't like a lot of water? What can you do to ensure that those plants are protected if you get a lot of rain? So that is one of the things that I am considering, and then see what I can do to ensure that such plants are protected. A lot of herbs, for example, do not like a lot of rain, like thyme, for example. They do not like a lot of water. So if they are too wet, then you can end up with your plants having problems. So one of the things that we need to keep in mind as we do our garden is the type of plants that we are growing and what conditions affect them, what condition is ideal for them. Yes, you can't do anything about rain, but sometimes depending on what you're growing, say for example, you have a set of herbs that do not like a lot of rain, and you're growing in container, or you know that maybe you can put something, cover them over so that they don't get too much rain. You can make it where you allow some of the rain to get in, but then when you think the plants have had enough, then you can probably cover them up so that the soil doesn't get too saturated and affect your plants. Creating proper drainage is another thing that we can do in case we get a lot of rain. So if you know that you're prone to getting a lot of rain, try to find ways that you can create additional drainage so that the water doesn't settle in your garden. Yes, and sometimes it can be too cold, so we might ask ourselves, what can we do if it is too cold? Sometimes we can create covers, plastic covers for our garden. Sometimes our garden is too big for that. But then when we're planting our garden, one of the things that we want to keep in mind is to try to keep cool weather crops together. Try to keep the heat loving plants together, because then what it does, it gives you an opportunity where you can cover over the plants that loves the if the time is going to be cold and you know that your plants love heat, then because you have all the plants in a similar location, then it makes it easier for you to cover them over. That way you're not covering the cool weather crop and the cold weather crop all together. So keeping them separate is a good practice. Let's see. Herb says, my herbs are sheltered at all times, so rain won't bother them. Awesome. Awesome. Mine are not covered at all. They're not sheltered. They're right out in the open. They get everything, whatever comes, whether it is drought or rain, they get everything. But the way where I have them, for the most part, at least where I started putting them last year, that area is set up where I can at least get plastic or something to cover them over. Yes. And then the next thing that we can consider as we plan for the next growing season is pests. What type of pest are you prone to have in your garden? Of course, like I mentioned before, sometimes you don't get the ones that you are looking for. You get another type of pest, but at least planning ahead, just in case the ones you're looking for shows up, then you are prepared. So it doesn't really mean that you have to go out and buy stuff in order to prepare just in case something happens. But as far as planning ahead goes, even to just tell yourself that, okay, if this problem arises, oh, hi, Alicia, how are you? Yeah, so telling yourself that if this problem arises, this is how I'm going to deal with it. Having that mindset, having that plan in place, it saves you a lot of time where when the problem do occur, if it does, from having to be contemplating what can you do at that point in time. You don't want to be making such a decision at that point in time. So planning ahead now, even if you're not getting supplies, is very beneficial. And one of the things that I like to do, let's see, Alicia says, wonderful, beautiful. Oh, thank you. Hi, Patricia. How are you? Say, I watched your video about separating the cabbage plant a while back. Oh, well, they grow after replanting. It depends on the condition that they are growing under. So, for example, when I was in Jamaica and I was growing cabbages, I would regrow my cabbage, but then I didn't really take the root out of the ground. I just cut off the cabbage head and then it would regrow. When it regrow like that, I get actual cabbage head from it again. And I've noticed, however, that here, when I do that, I get cabbage head if it is outdoors. When I'm growing it in containers, like I'm regrowing it, so it is the harvested cabbage that I'm actually regrowing and not the root that was in the ground, then it tends to grow where you get foliage, but you don't really get a head from the cabbage, as it were. It more wants to produce seeds. So that is what happens for my cabbages when I'm growing them indoors. At least that's what I've noticed this time around. So it goes right into seeding. But when I was regrowing them last year out in the garden, they didn't go into seeding. They actually produced cabbage heads. So I guess based on my experience that it depends on the conditions, of course, that you are growing them in. Yes. But then my condition indoors, as you guys may know, is not very ideal to be growing anything anything in, because my region is just too cold. So my windowsill is not really all that warm. It's just warm enough to keep them alive, not really to do anything else. And you know how it is when it comes to your brassicas that you're regrowing. If conditions are not ideal, then they tend to bolt. So it could be that because the condition is not ideal for those cabbages indoors, that is why they are bolting. Yes, but the ones that I did outside last year, they did pretty well. That didn't work for my broccoli though. They started to regrow, but they didn't really do much. They didn't grow any leaves. I don't know what happened to it because they rooted like pretty early in the game, but some of them got killed by the fungus gnat. So I think that was the biggest issue, that fungus gnats got to it while it was indoors. So maybe if I had started it outdoors, that would have given a different outcome because fungus gnats don't really bother plants outdoors, mostly indoors that they are a problem. But one thing that I recommend when you are regrowing vegetables, let me get one and show on. So this little vegetable, I do not know what it is called. We get it at the supermarket, and for whatever reason, it just comes in a clear plastic bag. There is no name on it or anything. You just know that it is a vegetable, and that's as far as it goes. But it is a very nice vegetable. And when I don't have access to my callaloo, then I decide to grow this. So I'm regrowing it for the seeds. Now, one thing that I observed last year as I was regrowing my broccoli is that my broccoli stem had a cut close to the bottom of it, and there was roots growing out of that cut. So what I've been doing since then is every time I try to regrow a plant, I put several cuts on the portion that is going to be in the water. So let me see if you can get a close up of that. So we have roots at the bottom. We have roots, lots of roots in the area that I cut, and I have several cuts and roots are growing in there. So when you put small cuts on it like that, it actually gives your plant a fighting chance in terms of producing roots. And by doing that, this is now producing seeds. It has flowers and it has a few tiny seed pods on it. It seemed to be doing a lot better than the same type of plant that I tried to regrow last year, because last year I just get the piece and stick it in water and it produced roots at the bottom and it took long for it to produce the root. This one, I put the cuts on it, and as you can see, it is producing lots of flowers and seed pods. So it is doing better than the one that I put into the water without putting those little cuts on it. And I try to change my water daily. Occasionally, I may not get the chance to change the water every day, but I try not to let more than 2 days pass without changing the water, because then it can grow bacteria which can kill the plant, and that's what we don't want. Let's see. Hi, Makia. Hey, how are you? Okay, you're welcome, Patricia. Hi, hey, Jay. How are you doing? See, Alicia withdrew her message. Okay, thumbs up for Makiyahe. AJ Topic says, I am ready to start planting, but it is still outside. Yes, aren't we all? We're just itching to get going, but for most of us, we're not able to get started outdoors yet. But for those plants that I can start inside, I'm definitely going to get them going. Let's see, Patricia says, good idea to cut the ends. I will try it. Okay. Let's see. Alicia says our cabbage leaves are browning for some reason. Are those cabbages that you're growing indoors, Alicia? And are they regrown cabbage or are they just cabbage that you'd grow normally? Okay, you're doing well, AJ. That's awesome. I'm doing okay too. I'm exhausted, but I'm okay. Okay, you're growing them outdoors, Alicia. Are they regrown cabbages or did you start from scratch or from seedlings? Uh, I'm not sure which question the no goes with. Yeah, so yes, as I was saying now, for my plants, one of the things that I like to do to prepare in advance for the growing season is to pay attention to what I am planting and research the type of pests that these plants are prone to. Because when you have an idea of what type of pest your plants are prone to, of course, you cannot really know all the pests that can bother them. But at the same time, having a good idea of the type of pest that affect each of the type of plants that you're going to grow, then you can put plans in place as to what you're going to do in case you have to deal with those pests. Okay, you started from seedlings. So could it be a nutrients deficiency? What they're turning brown. How are they turning brown? Are they turning brown from the outside, the perimeter of the leaves moving inwards? Are they turning yellow and then getting brown? And if so, is that happening from the base of the plant or from the tip of the plant? How is it turning? How is it changing color? Because each of those condition determines whether it is a nutrient deficiency and what type of deficiency you are having. So if you find that the leaves are turning brown from the perimeter of the plant, it could be that you are missing out on uh, potassium, magnesium. Those will cause it to brown from the tip, from the perimeter of the leaves. If it is that the entire plant is yellowing, then it could be that you're having a nitrogen deficiency. If it is that some of the leaves are turning yellow at the base of the plant and then going up, it could also be a pest issue. So there are many things that could be causing it to turn brown. So knowing those information can help you to solve what the problem actually is. Let's see. Anne says, I can wait. I'm not in a rush. I'm learning more about gardening. So this year I'm taking my time. Okay, awesome. Okay, you're growing them in container. Okay, the edges, yellowing then browning. So you need to check on your magnesium and your potassium because that could be what you are missing, why it is browning from the perimeter of the leaves and inwards. Okay, AJ, thank you for joining us. Stay safe. Oh, hi, Helpy. How are you doing? Busy lady. Oh, yeah, so I'm growing quite a few new plants this year. So I know that it means that I'm going to have to spend some more time doing research than I normally would because some of them I've never even heard of these plants before. So I'm going to have to spend some time and do some research on them, see what pests they're prone to, what diseases they're prone to, what type of condition they like to grow in because I hate to plant and then at the end of the day, they don't really come to anything. I guess we all hate that. We like to see when we plant and our gardens are looking quite healthy and nice. And I think that is why some of us fail at pruning because we like to see the luscious green garden. So sometimes a lot of the things that need to be pruned, we don't want to prune it too much because then it looks as if our garden is actually struggling. But the truth is that that is when our gardens are actually doing well. But you know how it is, we like all that nice, luscious greenery. Let's see. So Helpy says she's listening while she works. See, I actually sow more seeds indoors. Nice. Oh, what are you growing? Um, I think Imca berry. I got the name. Is I don't know if it is Imca or Inca berries. I am growing lipini or lupini. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I got the name right. And I'm growing some beans that I've never grown before. I don't even know what they're called because I don't really have them with me at the moment. But yes, I'm growing quite a few things that I haven't grown before. So I'm going to have to do some research to find out what is the best condition to grow them under, when to plant them, and stuff like that. So let's see. And so she's growing flowers this year. Awesome. Yes, I want to get some more flowers in. I didn't get any daffodil because I wanted to get some and plant them last fall. But then it was just getting too cold. I didn't really want to be outside. So I didn't go to get my daffodils and get them planted. So I guess I won't be having any daffodils blooming in my garden, but I'll definitely try to get some and plant them this year in the fall so that I can have them for next year. And I wanted to get more tulips with the ones that I already planted. That wouldn't be last year. It would be 2020 fall. Yeah, so I want to get more tulips, but I didn't get any flowers at all. And then I'm going to try to see if I can get a mixed blend of wildflowers because I like growing the wildflowers because then it's going to attract my pollinators. So let's see. Alicia says, I'm growing potatoes for canning. Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't do canning, not yet anyway. I've always wanted to get into it, but there's too much I need to learn about canning, and I don't really have the time to do it. So I keep putting it off. But hopefully someday I will get to it. I don't know when that's gonna be, but hopefully someday I will get to it. Let's see. LP says, you're so right. Pruning is painful. It is painful, especially those tomato plants, because tomatoes, when they have their nice, luscious leaves on them, they look so nice. But when you have to prune them down to just the skeleton, as it were, it's heartrending to look at, but at least the benefits is definitely, definitely worth it. Let's see. And says only bulbs. Okay, only flower bulbs that you're growing. Okay. LP says, and white. That's fantastic. Alicia says, yes, I learned that green is pretty but not food. Yes, unless it is a green leafy vegetables that you're growing, it's not really food. Although some of these foliage they say you can eat, but I don't really know about potatoes and tomatoes and pepper leaves. And says, yes, it's Inca. Okay, Inca berries. Okay, good. And says, I got flower plants instead of seeds. Okay. Yeah. I definitely might have to do that this year with a lot of the things that I want to grow in terms of flowers. I don't really want to grow my vegetable from seedlings. I like to watch my seedlings grow from seeds. But for flowers, since as I didn't really get an early start on some of them, and last year when I sowed my seeds, I had a really hard time with those flowers for whatever reason. So I think some of them I'm going to be buying the seedlings. I think one of the reasons why they didn't do so well last year was because of the climatic condition, because the winter lasted longer than it should, because they say that well, in my region, by the third week in May we can actually start planting, but then it was so cold the third week in May, and usually that time we can plant the heat loving plants. Last year it was so cold that we didn't get to start planting anything until the second week in June. So the heat loving plants, we weren't able to put them outdoors until June. So that's how bad it was. So with that in mind, a lot of the plants didn't do so well because they were delayed and they only have a short growing season in the first place. So I'm going to try and see, rather than starting from seeds for a lot of those flowers, I'm definitely going to be getting seedlings instead. Let's see. Anne says, I got tulips today. Oh, awesome. I'm a bit concerned about my tulips and my perennial plants that I have outdoors because it has been February is usually the coldest time of the year for us. And this year, that's not the case. December and January were the coldest. So we've had temperatures, usually we'd have temperatures in the 20s and minus 30s and feel like minus 40s, minus 50s for February. This time around, we've had it in the minus 20s and feels like minus 30s, nothing in the minus 40s or 50s for February. So we've had it where we've even had 0 degrees, like today, right now, outside it is 0 degrees in March, the first week in March, which is unheard of. So I don't really know what to expect from the growing season. I'm thinking that a lot of those perennials are going to get a false start, like they did last year, and then a lot of them end up dying. So I'm actually worried about my perennials that I have out there. What's going to happen to them if it continue being this warm? Are we going to have a fall start, or is it that we're just going to have an early growing season? If it is a early growing season, oh my goodness, I'd be delighted. Yes, I'd be on it. So I guess that means I better get started sowing my seedlings from now so that I'm ready just in case we're actually getting a early start. But I'm not holding my breath where that is concerned. Let's see. Alicia says, I'm learning to can myself. Okay. When do you prune tomatoes? I usually prune tomatoes after they start flowering. And the reason I wait until they are flowering is that now is the time when the plant is going to need all of that nutrients to send that nutrients to the fruit that it is going to be producing. So that is when you want to get rid of the foliage because you want to maximize the size of your yield, and you want to maximize not just the size, but if you have a lot of stems, for example, growing on the plant, then you're going to have a lot of fruits, provided that whatever you're pruning is fruit bearing. You're going to have a lot of fruits, and then you're going to find that the taste is going to be affected because the plant is struggling to maintain all of those fruits that are on it. So it's going to affect the size and it is going to affect the taste of the produce. So pruning helps with that. Now, when it comes to things like tomatoes, sometimes depending on the variety that you're growing, how you prune it. So, for example, if you are growing indeterminate tomatoes, then you want to make the main stem remain, and then all of the little suckers that comes up between the leaves, those are what you're going to be pruning out. And then you prune from the bottom upwards up until where there is flowers on the plant. Now, if you are growing the bushy variety, the bush, you cannot prune the portions, those seedlings that are coming up on the plant. You cannot prune those because that is where you're going to be getting your fruits from. Because remember, these plants are not going to be growing as tall as the indeterminate. So you want to prune the leaves that the suckers, so in the armpit of the plant, rather than taking out that sucker that would be in the armpit of the plant, you take off the leaves that forms the armpit, because then By allowing the suckers to remain there, that is where your fruit is going to come from. Alicia says, I'm interested in getting seeds from my plants after it goes to seed. I never did it before. Do you shake the seeds from the flowers? That depends on the type of flowers. So there are different ways that you can harvest. It depends on the type of flowers that you are growing. For some of them, the seed is readily available. You can just shake. For some of them, the seeds are actually in pods. So you will have to extract the seeds from the pods after allowing it to dry. So you want to make sure that they stay on the plant till the point where they are fully matured and start to dry before you cut them from the plant. And one of the reasons why you want to wait until you start seeing them drying on the plant is because then you're certain that the seeds have reached maturity. So sometimes you can just shake them out. Other times you may have to just extract them from the pods. Sometimes it is that you're going to have to do some separation process where you use either wind, not too strong of a wind because you don't want to be blowing away your seeds, but like a gentle fan breeze to blow away the chaff from the seeds. Now, some seeds you can allow them to dry fully because when you do that, the pods will open and the seeds will fall out for themselves. So you don't have to do that for yourself. And then you just separate the seeds from the chaff. One of the ways that you can do that too is by using a sifter. So whether it's going to be a small strainer or some 1/8 or whatever sifter you have that is large enough to allow the seeds to pass through and the chaff remains in the strainer or the sifter. So that is another way that you can actually separate them. Now, if it is the case that you don't know how to separate them, save the seeds anywhere, just cut off the flower head and dry it and store it. You can always just plant it out, chaff and seeds alike, plant them all together. At the end of the day, what is important is that you are able to get the seeds, right? Yes. So that is what I do sometimes. Sometimes I don't really have the time to separate them. Like last year when I was when I was harvesting my lettuce seeds, I didn't really have the time to separate them. So I just picked the lettuce seeds and put it down to dry. And it is still like that even now. I still haven't separated some of them yet. So no worries. Just find whatever works for you. Yeah, so as I was saying regarding the pests problems that we face from time to time, it's good to know the type of pests that affect individual type of plants. And then once we identify what these pests are, it's a good idea to figure out how to treat them, because when you know how to treat them, then if the problem arises, it makes it so much easier to get them under control. Another thing, another plan that we can put in place is having more than one type of methods for treating each type of pest, because pests adapt. So if you're constantly using the same type of treatment all the time, they are going to get accustomed to it and then it won't work. So you want to rotate the type of treatments that you are using for these pests. So it's a good idea to plan ahead, having several different options, and then you keep rotating them. Let's see. Anne says, I saw strawberry for the first time and they all germinated. Oh, that's awesome. Did you say you sent me some strawberry seeds? I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember. Last year was, oh yes, speaking of last year, strawberries, last year was just It was just terrible for the strawberries. The plants were beautiful and they were producing and they were doing well, but I hardly ever got any of my strawberries. Yes, I hardly ever got any of the strawberries because the birds were such a problem last year. The magpie were the worst because every year we have issues with birds. We have a Saskatoon berry plant in the backyard there, and it attracts a lot of birds. And then the neighbor has a bird feeding tree right up against the fence where the Saskatoon berry is. So between those two plants, they attract quite a lot of birds. So the birds would come in, and even the Saskatoon berries, we hardly got anything off it the last 2 years because of these birds. But the magpies were the worst of them. And they would just eat off the berries. My cherry, we've had the cherry for what, 2 years now? And from the first year we got it, it started producing. And we've never been able to eat one cherry off it because the birds are just. So that is one of the plans that I'm going to be putting in place, preparing for this growing season, is to, I can't really do much about the Saskatoon berry because it is pretty tall. But for my cherry, I'm going to be covering it over with a mesh to ensure that the birds cannot really get to it. And I'm going to be getting doing the same thing for my strawberries as well, covering them over so that the birds cannot get to it, because it is heartrending to see all those cherries and berries and stuff, and you work so hard to have them, and then at the end of the day you can't even harvest a good handful of them. So that is another plan that I'm going to be putting in place to ensure that I get them. And then last year too, I had issues with the caterpillars, the cabbage moth caterpillars. And so this year I'm going to be planting them in their own. Oh, I grow in my own. Yeah, so I'm going to be planting them in their own raised beds and create covers for those raised beds so that I can protect them from these cabbage moths. Let's see. And says, yes, I did. You need to sow them. Okay. Think I'm gonna get on that for next week as well. So my peppers, strawberries, and tomatoes. So definitely I'm gonna try my best to get that done next week. So what plans do you guys have in place, or do you have any plans in place for whatever issue you may face in your growing season this year? I like planning ahead because there are just so many things that happens that you're not really expecting, and then sometimes it makes it difficult. If it is just like one or two things out of the norm happens, then it's not too bad. But then when it is a lot of things that are happening out of the norm, getting them under control can be a challenge. And these days we tend to be getting busier and busier than usual, so having plans in place earlier make things a whole lot better. Yes, because last year the issues I faced in the garden were plenty, 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 because pests more than I've ever seen, on top of the drought and all the various issues. I've been planting indoors, starting seedlings indoors for quite a few years now. And last year was the first time I've had issues with fungus knots. I've never had an issue with them before, so I don't know what happens. What is the big difference? Why there are so many of them last year? And I think this year I'm going to be having issues with them as well, because the two little plants that I have trying to grow indoors, I'm starting to see where a few of them are emerging. So quite a few issues can arise. So try to plan ahead and see how you can best be prepared for them, because you don't want to be overwhelmed, because you know how it is when we get overwhelmed, sometimes we tend to want to give up. But this is our little way of relaxing, right? Or garden is how we get to actually relax, so we want to get the most out of it. We don't want to be frustrated when dealing with our garden. So yeah, I'd strongly recommend that you plan ahead, look at what you're growing, the type of pest that bothers them, how you can deal with these pests, or what kind of climatic condition you might have to face and how you can deal with them. And as you plan your garden, you want to think about your sunshine, how much sunlight you're getting, what part of your garden is getting the most sunlight, what part is getting the least amount of sunlight. What plants can you put where? Because there are some plants that love sunlight, some of which grow big, some of which does not grow big. So you need to plan ahead now. Where am I going to put the big ones? Where am I going to put the small ones? Because you don't want to plant the big ones in the location where they're going to be blocking the sunlight from the smaller ones. You want to plant them where both plants can get sufficient sunlight. And then for those cool weather crops, it is the same thing. Some are big, some are small. You want to plant them where they don't really affect each other too much. You know that some, even though they are cool weather crop, there are some that can tolerate some amount of heat more than others. So you want to plant them accordingly, so that the ones that prefers more heat will get more heat, and the one that prefers more cool shade will get more cool shade. So planning ahead for things like that will make a lot of difference to your garden in terms of your output at the end of the day. Okay, so Han says she will be covering her brassicas and beets. Yes, I'll definitely be doing that, because I don't really have much of an issue with my tomatoes and peppers, except for this year when I had the curly top virus, and well, last year. And that problem did not start with the peppers and tomatoes, it started with other plants. And then because I didn't act on it fast enough, it spread to the tomatoes and the peppers. So I'm definitely going to be covering my tomatoes and my brassicas. Well, not my tomatoes, my brassicas. My lettuces don't really tend to have a lot of issues, thankfully. I guess the biggest issues I face with lettuces are aphids. I don't know why my throat and my ear are so itchy. But yeah, so aphid is the biggest issues I've had with my lettuces. Last year, however, I had to deal with the heat. Everything was just bolting like pretty early in the game, 4 inches, and they were bolting. So definitely I'll have to take steps to ensure that I can keep them cool for longer. So I'm gonna be starting them a little bit earlier this year than my previous years. Um, Growing my own says she never know how to plan, because every year there is a new bug in the garden. It does make it a challenge. Sorry. It does make it a challenge when you constantly seeing new pests coming along. And I think that is why a lot of gardeners don't like to try growing new plants, because new plants mean the potential for new pests to be attracted into the garden. So for that reason, sometimes a lot of gardeners will try to avoid growing new stuff, or what they will try to do is to stick, if they know that, say, aphids are attracted to several different type of plants, they will try to grow these type of plants if aphids are the type of pest they have, because then it is not a different pest that they have to deal with for the new plants. It's the same one pest, so it's the same treatment. So yes, I know how tricky it can be trying to plan ahead because of these pests. But like I was saying before, look at the type of plants that you are growing and try to figure out what type of pest attracts them. All right. What type of pest affect them. And then when you do that, if you know, for example, you are planting tomato and tomato hornworm is what affect your tomato, then you plan ahead for what happens if you have tomato hornworms. But yes, I know what you mean, growing my own, because it was the same for me last year where in 2020 I had to deal with aphids, lots of aphids, and I had to deal with cabbage moth. But those were the two pests that I had to deal with in 2020. So I was planning for those type of pests for 2021. But then 2021, I didn't have any of those pests. Didn't have I had the cabbage moth, but I did not have the aphids. But then, because I was planning for what I already had, I wasn't prepared for what came. So the practice now is just to know the plants that I'm growing and the type of pest that affect it and plan ahead. Sometimes you might not get them, sometimes you might, but it's better to have a plan in place and nothing happens than to not have a plan and then something happens and we are too late in treating it. And another thing that I would suggest when planning ahead for the 2022 growing season is to find a group of people, especially if you are new to gardening. Find a group of people who, whether in your community or on YouTube or whatever social media you use, who are gardeners who have a good amount of experience, because these ones may be able to assist you in case you're facing challenges that you have never faced before and you don't know how to deal with it. So build a community, talk to fellow gardeners around you, and have those in place so that when situations arise, you can have someone you can fall back on who can assist you with these challenges. And so Growing My Own says it's going to be a challenge, but I'm so looking forward to it. Yes. I think we're all just anxiously waiting to get started. You know, some people actually got started already, but for us who still have ways to go before we get started, we're just itching to go. Yes, it's going to be a challenge. And this year, with all the different climatic problems that we are seeing globally, I don't really think this year is going to be any better than last year. In fact, I would not be surprised if it is worse this year than it was last year. So that is why I'm trying to plan ahead to see what steps. There's not really much that we can do, but the little that we can do, I am at least trying to see how I can get them done just in case. And sometimes we have things that we can do to protect the plants, but sometimes it can be a bit expensive getting those done. So my suggestion is, for example, if you know that you have problem with pest and you're growing in containers or raised beds and you want to use row cover or something to that effect to protect your plants. Sometimes because of the amount of these raised beds or containers that we have, sometimes it's just so expensive to buy the material to get those set up. So my suggestion is, rather than saying you don't have the means to cover them, start with one. You start with one and you get that one done. And even if that's the only one you get done for that year, at least it is out of the way. And then next year or the next chance you have, you move on to the second one. So take it step by step, because if you have to go from here to another location and if you don't take the first step, you never reach your destination. Sometimes the steps that you're taking is small, but as long as you keep it consistent, you will eventually reach your destination. But if you're looking at oh, the distance from here to there is so long, I can't make it, it's going to take too much, then we're never going to get there. So take it little by little, do what you can now, because think about it. If you say, for example, you're able to cover just one bed for this year and the pest comes, at least you would have saved one of your beds, right? But if you didn't do anything because of whatever reason, and then the pests come and you lose everything, then it's going to be even more heartrending. So little by little, do what you can, and just know that someday you will eventually get there. Let's see, LP saying hello. Okay. LP says, I'm so nervous about my brassicas. The pests just murder them. Light and spacing are other things I need to work around. I think I'm going to cover my squash and hand pollinate because of the vine borer. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yes, me too, my dear. I'm very, very concerned about my brassicas and my lettuces because I look forward. I really, really look well. If I'm planting it, I'm looking forward to it. But I'm really looking forward to my brassicas, and most of you know that I really like my Chinese cabbage. So when the cabbage moth destroy them, it's just too much. So definitely I'm going to try my best to get those covered. If nothing else, those definitely I will try to get covered. For some reason, peppers and tomatoes don't seem to be prone to a lot of pest issues as other plants. They are still prone to pest issues, but they don't seem to be as prone, which is excellent. See, growing my own says every time I look outside and see snow, I just cut my eyes, kiss my teeth, and want to see some green. I know, my dear, I know. Yes, it is. It is very frustrating. And you know what? Um, Day before yesterday, I was just as I was driving, I was thinking, oh, look at that. We are actually able to see the roads. We're not able to see the lawn, but we're at least able to see the roads, even because the main streets the government will clean, but then if it's not main street, it doesn't really get cleaned properly, so or cleaned at all. So as I was driving in areas that they wouldn't clean, I'm like, oh yes, we can finally see the road. The snow is melting, even the height of the snow is going down. And then the snow came yesterday and we had 10 inches of snow. I'm like, oh my gosh, everything is white and I can't see the road anymore. So I know your frustration, my dear. Yes, I don't know. And then they're saying we're supposed to get some more snow. So it is 0 degrees outside at the moment. So some of it is melting, but it's still, everything is still just white out there. I don't know when it's going to go away. Hopefully sooner rather than later, but I'm not holding my breath. Last year we had snow the first few days. Well, one day in June, in the first week of June, which is the first time in 12 years that I've seen it. Don't know when before that it happened because I wasn't here, but in the 12 years that I've been here, last year, June was the first time I've actually seen where the first week in June we got a little snow. Of course, it didn't last. As soon as it hit the ground, it melted. But the fact is, this is June and we had snow. Yes, the whole world, the weather worldwide is just chaotic. I keep looking at my garden too, my dear. Keep looking at it, trying to see when I'm going to be able to see anything, even a little hint of soil or something. But oh well, it will eventually go away and we'll be able to get out there and start planting. So for now, we just need to put in place whatever plans, whatever preparation we can, so that when the time comes, we will be able to hit the ground running. Okay, you find it hard to pollinate squash, Alicia. Okay. Um, it can be tricky depending on how you're doing it. So, when you get the male flower and the female flower, and you strip back everything except for the stigma, I think it is called, for the male, then you use that to pollinate the female part, trying to get it down into the female flower as much as possible. But that doing it that way can be more trickier than if you actually get a very soft brush and take the pollen from the male flower and use it to pollinate the female one. So I find that using the brush or the Q-tip works a lot easier, because then you can get to spread the pollen all over the female flower as opposed to just some portion of it. Let's see, LP says we had a 70 degrees Fahrenheit yesterday, then snow today. Yep. Wow, 70, eh? That's not bad. That's nice. I could take some of that like right now. Yes, I think they said sometime this week we're supposed to have 2 degrees Celsius. Uh, I don't know. I don't think I look forward to the warmth this time of year. Not because one, I look forward to the fact that it is melting the snow, so it's less snow when the growing season gets here. But then the mess that it creates outside and then it freezes, that's the part that I don't like, because when it melts like that and then the snow, then it gets cold overnight and everything freezes, and it's just like you wet a piece of glass and try to walk on it. It's just all slippery and dangerous out there. So I don't really like when it gets too warm, but at the same time, I don't want it to be too cold. I'd like it to just stay in a region where it is at least tolerable until the time when it is ready to melt and melt for good. Yes, but anyway, in the next few minutes, I'm going to be saying goodbye to you guys so I can head off to work. Hopefully, you guys are going to have a really nice and successful garden this year. Hopefully, you'll be able to combat the challenges and that the challenges won't be too much. But you know how it is. We know what we want, but we are not really in control in terms of what happens. But we are in control in terms of how much preparation we put in place to overcome the challenges. Yeah, so okay, so I think that is it for now. Hopefully, I'll see you guys again on Friday, and we'll be doing our worm farm Q&A live. Hopefully, all is well, and I'll get the chance to join you guys. Yeah, so until then, take care. Bye, Han. Bye, everyone. Stay safe out there.